Hi, I'm John Hornick. Welcome to lesson 65 of Chef's Apprentice, learning to cook like a pro, one small plate at a time. This lesson is pork and beans, Thai style. This preparation is a trip to Thai tastes and ingredients and is my Thai twist on a classic American dish. Thai is a complex and rich cuisine, so we can't even scratch its surface here. This dish utilizes some ideas I picked up in a Thai cooking course in Phuket and introduces you to Thai curries, which are nothing like Indian curries. While sauteing the spices for this dish, you will see how this technique draws out their aroma. You will also learn a new basic technique, making a marinade, which is the mixing of ingredients that do not normally mix, such as oil and water or egg yolks and oil. Mayonnaise and many salad dressings are emulsions. To form an emulsion properly, vigorously whisk the oil or other ingredient in a very thin stream, either by hand or in a food processor. Add the yolk or oil no faster than you're able to incorporate it into the other ingredient. The oil will become suspended in the water or yolk and form a velvety mixture. The emulsion you will make here is simpler. You will simply whisk together the ingredients and use them as a marinade. The preparation of the pork for this dish follows the same basic techniques as the pork tenderloin master recipe. Techniques today are trimming pork tenderloin, chopping, grinding coriander seed, grating ginger, whisking and making an emulsion, marinating, sauteing spices, reducing, working with Thai curry, making a sauce, sweating, deglazing, seasoning, bringing to a boil, and simmering, pureeing, adjusting seasoning and keeping warm, roasting pork tenderloin, resting, checking doneness, slicing, plating, and garnishing. So let's start cooking. All right, let's talk about the mise en place for lesson 65. There are a lot of ingredients here, but this is still a moderate difficulty preparation. Of course, we're going to need pork tenderloin, and this is really half of the pork tenderloin. The description calls for a whole one because you're going to do enough for 8. I'm only doing for 4 tonight, so I'm using half a pork tenderloin. You want to trim it of any extra fat. If there's still a little left on there, it's fine, and trim off the silver skin. Okay. We're also going to need to have ingredients for the marinade for the pork. About 1 tablespoon of minced garlic. Why minced? Minced because you get more surface area the more finely you chop something, so you get more of the flavor off of it. This isn't going to be pureed or anything, so we want to be able to lift as much of that garlic flavor off of there as possible, so it's minced. Okay. We'll also need to have 2 tablespoons of kecap manis, and there's a source for it in the description. This is basically sweet soy sauce, and it's thicker than soy sauce. About 2 tablespoons of that. About 2 tablespoons of regular soy sauce, and 2 tablespoons of oyster sauce. And then one teaspoon of canola oil. All right, those are the ingredients you'll need to make the marinade. Now we're going to talk about the ingredients you need to make the sauce. I'll put this away for just a moment. Now for the sauce, we're going to need to have coriander seeds that are freshly ground, 2 tablespoons. Now you can grind them in a spice grinder. I don't use a spice grinder because if I use a spice grinder, my wife says now when we grind coffee, the coffee always smells like the spice that you ground in the coffee grinder. So I'm using a mortar and pestle. And so I'm starting out with the whole seeds, and I'm using the pestle to crush them until I've crushed most of the seeds. Then after you've gotten them crushed, you can take the pestle and go around the mortar like this. Why don't you start this way? If you do, the seeds will go flying out all over the place. So you want to crush most of the seeds first, and then take your pestle, go round and round and round, and crush them until you get basically a powdered coriander seed. Now, could you go ahead and buy powdered coriander seed? Yes, you could, but you won't get nearly as much flavor out of it. 2 teaspoons of coriander seeds, crush them yourself. Remember, this is cook like a pro. Okay, then we'll need about 2 tablespoons of canola oil. I'm just going to eyeball that when we get to it. Then we'll need 1 tablespoon each of 2 types of Thai curry. Now, this is panang Thai curry and massaman Thai curry. Massaman, I'm sorry. And they're basically, they're pastes, and they're pre-made. I've never tried to make these myself from scratch. The stuff lasts forever. We're going to use 1 tablespoon of each one of these. And This is the M-A-E Ploy, P-L-O-Y brand. There are a lot of brands out there. Some of them come in cans, some of them can come in these bags. I like the bags better. We'll need about a half a cup of chicken stock. Remember, we have a separate lesson on making stock. It's also on my website on the stock chart, www.chefsapprentice.com. We're gonna need about a half a cup to make the sauce and a half a cup to make the beans. So I have probably a little bit more than a cup here. We'll need to have 1 tablespoon of palm sugar, 1 tablespoon of fish sauce. We'll need to have the juice, fresh juice of half of a lime. And then we'll need to have, okay, so those are all the ingredients to make the sauce. Okay, now we'll talk about the ingredients to make the beans portion of this dish. First, we're going to need soybeans, or edamame. You may know them as edamame. In Japanese restaurants, you get them in this whole bean, and then you kind of chew the bean out of the shell. You throw the shell away. Now, these are frozen. I can only find them in the shell, so I'm going to take them out of the shell after they thaw, and we'll need about 8 ounces of just the edamame beans, or the soybeans themselves. 2 tablespoons of chopped shallots, 1 tablespoon of chopped celery, 1 tablespoon of chopped garlic. Now, this doesn't have to be chopped as finely as the garlic for the marinade. I explained why we have it finely chopped for the marinade. For the beans, it doesn't need to be as finely chopped because we're going to be pureeing the beans after they're cooked. Also, about 1 tablespoon of grated ginger, or you could very finely chop it. And remember, I use ginger that's been preserved in either sake or sherry. Keeps forever that way, and that way I don't have to worry about fresh ginger going bad. We need to have about 1/4 cup of dry sake, and then about 1 tablespoon, probably less, of freshly chopped cilantro. I have a lot more than that here. I'll just use what I need at the end. It's just for garnishing. Then we'll need some olive oil and some kosher salt and a pepper mill for freshly ground black pepper. That's all the ingredients. We'll break, come back. I'll show you the equipment for lesson 65. Okay, let's talk about the equipment for lesson 65. We're going to need a cutting board and chef's knife. We're going to need to have a fillet knife to get that silver skin and fat off of the pork tenderloin, a slicing knife to slice the pork tenderloin later on in the preparation. We'll need that mortar and pestle that I mentioned earlier so you can grind up the coriander seed. You'll need to have a juicer to squeeze the juice of the half lime, and a microplane grater if you're going to grate the ginger. You also need to have a bowl and whisk to mix the marinade. And we're going to need to have a Ziploc bag to marinate the pork. And I always use the Joe Carey bag filler, which I think deserves the Nobel Prize in bag filling devices. And I'm going to put that Ziploc bag onto a sizzle plate. You just need some kind of a holding pan. Remember, the reason we do this is in case the bag leaks, you don't have the marinade going all over the refrigerator, okay? So the sizzle plate's going to catch that marinade. We also need to have a saucepan and a wooden spoon to make the sauce, and another saucepan and wooden spoon to make the beans. Then we're going to need to have a blender to puree the beans, and a strainer and a rubber spatula to strain, to press the beans through the strainer later so we get a puree, like the consistency of mashed potatoes. Then we're going to need either a baking pan or a sizzle plate to finish the pork tenderloin in the oven. We're going to need to have a skillet. That's supposed to be on the stove, but it's not. A skillet to start the pork tenderloin recipe. And then we're going to need to have a brush or a spoon for plating at the end. We may use both, we may use one or the other, we'll see. And then finally we'll need plates, we'll pick those later. So let's break now, come back and start cooking. Okay, the first thing on our prep list is to make the marinade. Okay, so we're going to first add the oil. Now, if we were making a more of a traditional emulsion, we would drizzle this oil in at the end as we're whisking, but we don't need to do that for this simple emulsion. We're going to add then the garlic, And then the kecap manis. This kind of stuff is kind of thick, so I usually try to get it all out of the holding container with a rubber spatula. You can use a spoon, obviously. Also, we want to add the regular soy sauce, and then the oyster sauce. Same thing, it's kind of thick, right? So I'm going to use the spatula to get it out, get it all out. Okay, and then we're just going to whisk this together. Okay, next, oh, it has a great smell. Next, we want to put the pork tenderloin into the Ziploc bag so we can do the marinating. And I'm using the carry bag filler. You obviously don't have to do that. You can just put it into the bag, but it's a lot less messy if you use this bag filler. Then we're going to add the pork tenderloin to the bag, and then add the marinade on top of that. So I'm going to use my spatula to get as much of this marinade as I can. Okay, then we want to get as much air out of the bag as we can. Again, why is that? You get better coverage of the marinade on the meat that way. Okay, then we're going to close the Ziploc, close the zip on the Ziploc, and then I'm going to put it on the sizzle plate. Now we're going to put this into the refrigerator for 4 to 6 hours, and it's okay if you just do it overnight. So if you do it the prior day, just leave it overnight until the next night when you're ready to cook. All right, so this is going into the refrigerator 4 to 6 hours. Okay, next thing on our prep list is to heat the oven to 450 degrees and to bring the pork tenderloin to room temperature. Okay, now we're going to make the sauce. Okay, we're going to need about 1 to 2 tablespoons of canola oil, high smoke point oil. I'm going to put it on to low heat. Okay, then we're going to add the coriander seeds. And we're going to let those cook until they start to become a bit fragrant. We're going to have to keep a good eye on them. As they get warm, they can burn very easily, so we're going to need to keep an eye on them. Okay, it's been about 4 or 5 minutes. I've been stirring this pretty constantly, and it is smelling very fragrant. Now we want to add about 1 tablespoon of the panang curry and kind of break that up, mix it around. We want to also cook that until it starts to get fragrant. And then we're going to do the same thing with the massaman curry. Okay, now it's been only about a minute or so that I've been stirring around the panang curry. It's getting nice and fragrant. Now we're going to add the massaman curry. And you might notice this is not an exact tablespoon, okay? About a tablespoon. This stuff is kind of potent in the aroma category, so it might make you want to cough a little bit or take your breath away a little bit if you inhale it too deeply. So we're going to cook that for about a minute as well. Okay, it's been about a minute. Now we're going to add about 1/2 cup of stock, chicken stock, and we're going to add the palm sugar, stirring, and the fish sauce, and the lime juice. Now, we want to stir that up really well, kind of cook it as we stir it, get it very well blended. And then we want to reduce it by about 1/3, okay, which is going to involve raising the heat a little bit and reducing it by 1/3. Why do we reduce? Reducing is always to intensify flavor and usually also to thicken. So now I'm going to let that come to a boil, raise the heat a little bit, just to a boil. As soon as it comes to a boil, I'm going to reduce the heat a little bit and let it reduce by about 1/3. Make sure when you stir in the corners too, so you don't get any burning in the corners. Okay, so it's just come to a boil. I'm going to just reduce the heat a little bit. Now, you know, you usually are raising heat for purposes of reducing, but I don't want it to boil or burn and I don't want it to burn at all. I don't want it to boil too quickly. So I'm just reducing the heat a little bit. It's probably now on just a little bit below medium. We're going to let that reduce by about 1/3. Okay, our sauce is reduced by about 1/3, and we're now going to take it off the heat and keep it warm until we're ready to plate. All right, now we're going to make the beans, which in this case are soybeans. So we're going to add some olive oil. It's probably about a tablespoon, maybe a little bit more. I'm going to put it up to medium heat, and then we're going to add the mirepoix, which in this case is shallots and celery. We're just going to give them a little bit of seasoning, very lightly. Stir them up. Let them sweat. Okay, our mirepoix is translucent. We're going to add the garlic and the ginger and stir it for about 30 seconds. We don't want it to burn. Okay, the garlic and the ginger are smelling nice and fragrant. It's probably been about 30 or 40 seconds. Now we're going to deglaze with the sake. Okay? And as always, we reduce it till it's just wet. Okay, so we have deglazed and reduced with the sake until the mirepoix is just wet. Now we're going to add the beans, the soybeans, the edamame, and stir it up. Now we're going to add some stock. Now, how much stock we add, we have to be careful. If we cover the beans with stock, we're going to get something that's closer to a soup. So we want the stock level to be below the top of the beans, because what we're going for is something, the consistency more of mashed potatoes. You can always add more liquid to thin it. It's hard to get it out, all right? It's hard to thicken it once you've put the liquid in there, okay? So I think we have probably not quite enough. The beans are still almost entirely up above the stock. Okay, so now we have where the beans are poking through. Okay, they're not covered with the stock. All right, that's good. Now we want to add a little bit of seasoning. We can adjust the seasoning later, so don't overdo it. Okay, now we want to bring that to a boil. Okay, so our beans are just coming to a boil, so we are going to reduce the heat and let them simmer for about 5 to 10 minutes. We want to simmer until the beans are tender when you poke them with a toothpick. Okay, the soybeans, they simmered for about 10 minutes, so now we're going to puree them. Now when you have a small amount in the blender, you might need to press everything down into the blades a couple of times. Okay, let's see how we're doing. Okay, looks like we have a very nice puree down in there. It looks about to be the consistency of mashed potatoes. We're going to remove the blades and get the soybean puree off the blades. I don't want to waste any of it. All right, now I've put the the puree into a strainer, and now we're pushing it through the strainer back into clean saucepan. Okay, so this way we're going to get a nice smooth puree without any lumps. Okay, now what do we always do at this point? We rinse off our spatula, and then we get the puree off the bottom of the strainer so we don't waste any. Okay, now we want to taste it and adjust the seasoning if necessary. I think it needs more salt. A little bit more salt. Let's get our tasting spoon. Perfect. Okay, now we're going to keep this warm until we're ready to serve. All right, here we have our pork, which marinated for about, I don't know, 6-7 hours, something like that. We're going to take it out of the marinade and shake off the extra marinade. All right, then we want to pat it dry. All right, then we want to coat it with olive oil and salt and pepper. Now, you could use a brush to do this, or once you get the salt and pepper on both sides, you could then just take your hands and smear that olive oil around, pick up what you dropped onto the plate. Okay, we're now ready to cook the pork. All right, let's add a little oil to the pan, about 1 to 2 tablespoons. We're gonna get that oil hot till it's just starting to have whiffs of smoke. And then we're gonna sear the pork. Okay, let's sear this pork. Now we want to get it seared on both sides and maybe a little bit on the edges if we can. And then we're going to put it in the oven. So that's how it's doing. Oh, it looks good. Okay. Now that took about 2 to 3 minutes, but it's going to vary depending on your stove, your heat, whatever. I have it on medium heat, but you know, different stoves differ. That looks great. See that? Beautiful. Okay, now we're going to try to get this edge a little bit. Okay, now we're going to put this on a sizzle plate and we're going to put it in the oven. Now the pork tenderloin master recipe says put it in at 450 degrees for 9 minutes, turn it and do 3 more. But this pork tenderloin is a little bit on the small side, so I'm going to do 7 minutes and then turn it for 3, and I'm also going to use the instant read thermometer to check the internal temperature, which should be, we're going for 135 degrees, which is medium. Right, into the oven. Okay, the pork's been in the oven for 7 minutes. Remember, it's normally 9 minutes on the pork tenderloin master recipe for a normal size pork tenderloin. I've turned it. I'm going to put it back in for 3 more minutes. Okay, it's been 3 more minutes. We're going to take this out of the oven. I'm going to leave the oven on in case I need to put it back in. And we're going to let this rest for about 3 minutes in a warm place. Okay, let's see how we did. I'm going to cut the meat on a diagonal. Oh, we have nice, it's just medium inside it, which is perfect. Okay, now we're going to cut this into slices that are about 1/4 of an inch thick. You can cut it really as thick as you want, but remember, you're going to have to have enough slices for whatever number of people you're serving. And I'm going to figure about 2 slices per person, because again, this is a small plate. And then once you get down toward the end, I usually don't do slices down there, but I love to eat those end pieces later. And okay, so we're going to slice this up. Okay, now we're going to put this back on the sizzle plate. Then I want to add all these juices back onto that sizzle plate. See, this may be too hot for the board. Let's see. No, it's okay. Now what we want to do is take our sauce and brush these pieces. I'm going to get a pretty liberal amount on there. If we have extra sauce, we can use it later for something else. Okay, now I'm going to put these back in the oven for about 30 seconds just to warm the sauce and to warm the pork. Okay, it's time to plate up. What we're going to do is we're going to put the edamame puree, the beans basically, down in the center of the plate. Remember, you're going to have to divide this up among whatever number of people you're serving. And then we're going to arrange the pork on the edamame puree. And we have enough here for 3 slices per person. Then we're going to garnish that with a little cilantro. And there we have it. That's lesson 65, pork and beans Thai style. You can see photos of the final dish at my Instagram, which is at Chef's Apprentice, Cook Like a Pro. Next up is beef nagamaki. Please remember to subscribe to my channel, and thanks for watching.